are we ready? Yes? All right. To wake you all up, a small audience participation. Can you just scan this information and tell me which region has the highest sales? The highest price or, yeah, you don't have the columns on top, so it's hard to tell, but yeah, okay. Now can you tell me which product has the highest sales? Yeah, no. So the small font notwithstanding, it is really difficult to know because there are so many multiple dimensions, there's so many rows to process, just the overwhelming amount of information. So in this talk, I want to really talk to you about this phenomenon of big data. And while we are so enamored by big data and the process of collecting and curating all this big data, we sometimes tend to forget about the human being at the other end who has to make sense of it and make decisions. So first, I want to talk to you about the big data phenomenon as I see it, and also just give you a sense that it is a phenomenon that's growing. Does anyone here have a chance to work with big data as of now? Yes? So I see a few hands, and I have a feeling that more and more of you will be confronted with this phenomenon and having to deal with it. And in fact, the skills that you have as an information architect will really come into play in this new era. So before we go, I just want to level set and talk to you about what is big data. So when someone talks about big data, they really are talking about three things. First is the sheer volume. You know, our storage capabilities have grown to such an extent that in 1956, that big refrigerator there was 5 MB. Today, the little thumb drive is 64 gigabytes. So as you can see, I mean, it's exponential. It's not a linear progression, it's an exponential progression. To give you more of a context, every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. I didn't hear about this word until I started doing research, quintillion bytes of data. And to understand what that means, if you put the data into Blu-ray discs, and you just simply stack those Blu-ray discs one on top of another, you will have 4 Eiffel Towers tall worth of data. And this is what we create every day. Right? The next is a variety of data. So we are doing texting, there are people taking photographs, multimedia, video, audio. It's a lot of it is structured, a lot of it is unstructured, but we are generating different types of data. To give you an example, we are all becoming creators of this data. So in 2005, when the Pope was elected, that was how people were experiencing it. They were actually standing there and looking on. Whereas in 2013, everyone has a mobile phone. And all this data is going somewhere. So that's the second thing, is a variety of data. And the third aspect is the velocity. The velocity is the traffic that's created, or the sheer speed with which data is passing back and forth. So to give you a sense of that, every minute we have 216 Instagram posts every minute. 204 million emails, 12 hours of YouTube video uploads, and 277 tweets per minute. So as you can see, it's just really phenomenal growth, exponential growth. And 90% of the data that we have created, according to IBM, was created in the last 2 years. All the Eiffel Towers that I showed you, most of it, 90% of that was created in the last 2 years. So that you can see as years go by, this progression is going to just accelerate. So when people talk about data, there are more V's, but we say the 3 V's of data: volume, variety, and velocity. So now I work in enterprise software, so business software. Is anybody here working in a business software context? Great, so you guys know what I'm talking about, but let me give a level set of what that means and how that relates to big data and how businesses see this impact. The best way I like to explain enterprise software is when you order something online, it arrives at your door, everything that happens in between is enterprise software. So you have an order that's created, a sales order that's created. Inventory is checked, do you have the product? If it's not there, you have to go get the raw material. You have to produce it. You invoice your customer. You ship it. Shipping and logistics. It hands up in the hands of the customer. All these processes have to be recorded in the company's financial books, and the salaries of the people doing the work has to be paid. So this is in essence what enterprise software, the main focus of it. It's expanding its scope, but this is the main essence of what business software is all about. I work with a lot of customers, and what we see today with businesses is something that we call digital transformation. And digital transformation refers to how things that were analog before are being digital now. Customers, suppliers, and subcontractors, contractors, they're all doing, they're connecting digitally right now. So all that information is what we call hyperconnectivity of the business software. Then you have cloud and mobility. More and more businesses are doing business in the cloud, and every employee has a mobile phone. They're doing their business on a mobile phone. That's creating data and traffic as well. Internet of Things, things that were analog before, like a car, for example, now generates data. So that's also part of what creates the big data for customers. So customers, and our customers, meaning big businesses, are getting a lot of data that they have to deal with. So now, more and more, it's not a question of finding answers to your questions. It's about asking the right questions because you have so much data already. So in this essence, I think the information architecture that we talk about is slightly different from physical architecture because of the way it can morph and change, and so it can adapt to your needs. So I think the key thing here in the future is being able to ask the right questions. And what I'm going to be talking about now is how do you, some examples of how to do that. Any questions so far? Good? Okay. I work in a team called the Design and Co-Innovation Center. And it's a team within SAP where we're kind of a design agency within SAP. So I work with the different customers. And we have 3 locations, so I run the Americas. And our mission is to humanize business software. We use this process called design thinking. So we say discover, design, deliver, and it's how many of you are familiar with design thinking already? Great, excellent. Yeah, so this is going to really help you out. So the main aspects of design thinking is the problem framing before problem solving. So when we are dealing with very ambiguous questions, many of our stakeholders, when they come to us, it's not so much about make this screen look good or I know all the product features and functions, just go ahead and design for it. It's more about having a dialogue with them, helping them think through what their main objectives are, how to create the experience that they're looking for. So this design thinking process really helps us do that. And we worked with about 400 plus customers in the last 3 years. And I'll give you 3 examples today. So I picked these examples to give you an example of how big data is really benefiting, or helping the different fields. So the field of marketing, the field of medicine, and sports. So the field of marketing. More and more information about us is being collected, as is not a surprise to you. But the way it needs to be used and consumed is completely different. So if you're a marketing analyst in a company, the type of the ask from your organization would be, I need to place an ad, in SFO, and it has to be in a place that can be seen by 18 and 24-year-olds. There's a typical question that a marketing analyst would deal with, and they would figure out where is the traffic pattern and whatnot. Now it's completely different, right? So we are looking. I'll tell you there are terabytes of data being collected about customers. So how do you answer these questions, and how do you think through the problems differently? So the cartoon that I showed you earlier, just because you have a ton of data doesn't mean you automatically make better decisions, right? You have to think through it in a more meaningful way. So when we encountered this project, we sat down with marketing analysts to try to figure out how do you approach a problem? What is your starting point? How do you think through it? And then synthesizing the information, and then finally working through the designs to the final completion. So to give you a context, 14 billion data points per day are generated. And some of the design principles that we worked with are anonymity, data clarity, quality, and playing with data. So this is one thing that was an interesting insight for us. Initially we thought that, how can we design a system that gives people just access to our recommendation, but people really want to play with the data. So when this big data, even though we're at a stage where people haven't learned to trust it as much, so in order to establish trust, allowing people to play and slice and dice it and look for themselves is critical to building trust and collaboration. So I should play a small video that talks about this project.
In the beginning of the project, when we started to learn what is the data that we have in our hand, it was a little bit overwhelming to see, you have over 1 billion records coming from those phone providers, from those cell phone providers, and really how can we use that data and how can we make meaningful insights for the media planners.
We innovated marketing analysts to understand the market to their goals, the challenges, and how we can make it better. We realized they want to find customer patterns from the meaningful visualization in a massive amount of data.
2 keywords that we focused on through the design process were flexibility and constraint. For example, time and location are the most common elements for all use cases. We use them as the constraints and the starting point to create an analytic report.
Consumer Insight 365 gathers and aggregates 14 billion anonymized telecom data points per day into easy-to-understand visualizations that allow the company to see consumer trends. Marketing professionals can now analyze consumer profiles and behavior. You can compare and combine dimensions instantly.
The partnerships that we developed with the development team and the product management team really showed through the product, because it was really important for us to understand some of their hesitation and why they don't want to do certain things, and try to negotiate on things that were important for us as user experience designers. And I think it's really showed in the end product, because there is not much gap between what's designed and what is built. And I think that's a good testimonial for the good partnership we have with them.
Yeah, this product, earlier talk you heard about knowing your materials and the importance of that, and I think here as well, that close partnership with the development team, the product management team, and just making sure that the stakeholders are all included is an important way to make sure you build something that can be ultimately be useful and enjoyable. This product actually won a UX award for Best Enterprise Experience. Any questions about that? We can save time for questions in the end as well, and I'll go on to the next example. The next example is kind of serious, so it has an SAP, it's a medical insight research, so I'll tell you all about it. What it is that when the original project brief was when patients, cancer patients, when they come to the hospital, there are people who are trying treatments as well, so there's a lot of experimentation going on in the medical space right now. So there are some specific treatments that can only work for specific patients, with certain symptoms and characteristics. So it's very important to make sure that you give the right treatment to the right patients based on a whole bunch of data. So initially it was about how can we have all this information, it's very fragmented right now. There's patient data, and then there's all kinds of other information. It's very difficult for the researcher to put it all together and find the right patients. So how can we help? How can technology help make this more easy for the researchers? So that was the original ask. So when we started talking to we interviewed the researchers, the doctors, the nurses, and a lot of patients as well. And what we found was we can do that, what they're asking for, which is to match the patients and the treatment. But what we could do is, as a patient comes into the doctor's office and they are talking about a set of symptoms, we can automatically do a pattern matching to see what other patients have received this treatment, what was the success rate, and have more proactively suggest certain treatments as well. So this was a very meaningful project that we worked on, and this actually won the Red Dot Award for design. And again, I think the key thing is there is just an overwhelming amount of data about the medicine as well as about patients and all the different symptoms. And here, you're thinking through it and structuring the information in a meaningful way, and with the deep empathy for the researcher who needs to make that meaningful decision, as well as for the patient, is critical to the success. The third example I want to talk about is the Super Bowl city. Did anybody have a chance to go to the Super Bowl city? Yeah, okay. I know it was a bit crazy with traffic and so on, but we had a chance to work on the Super Bowl, the fan experience. So in the dome, right there are these game stations, and then there's a big jumbotron over there. It's called Fan Energy Zone, where the data about the players are being shown. So that was a project brief, and we were asked to work on that, capture the information as well as display information displayed in the big jumbotron. One of the things that we encountered was there's a lot of information, and in order to engage the fans, it's really about identifying the key pieces of information that will make people more draw the fans in. So what are those key pieces of information, and how can we engage the fans better? So again, a lot of design collaboration amongst the different stakeholders. One thing you will see that in these large projects is there are multiple stakeholders and multiple points of view, and this is where the human-centered aspect of design thinking comes into play. You have you have the host committee, you have the NFL league, you have the sponsorship teams, as well as we created personas for the fans that we want to engage. And one of the things, right from the start, I don't know too much about football, But I was thinking there must be more people like me, right? So we wanted to make sure that it's not just about, the games are not just about football, but how could we engage someone who wants to have a great experience, there's something coming to their city, they come there with their family, how can they have a great experience? So bringing that kind of, creating the personas. So we created 3 personas. One of them was an ardent football fan, one of them was more a technology person. They come in there, they're seeing some cool stuff, they want to engage, and then a family person. So they want to make sure that the kids have a great time. So they're designing the experience on the large wall. And one of the key things is that just because you have a large display doesn't mean you can just put a ton of data in there, but curating what is the right information that can draw the fans in again. That's the key. So this was the large wall that was designed, and we tried to also find out where they're coming from, where are the players coming from. So we did a little graphic over there, and 1.1 million people came between Jan 30th and Feb 7th. So this was an interesting project of getting all the stakeholders together. So there are some more projects that I think may be relevant for you guys, and I'm happy to take questions after. We worked on a project for City of Boston. So one of the issues that they had was they had created a website based on their departmental divisions, so the silos within their departments. But if you are a resident or a developer or a business owner, you need to go to all these different places to get the information. So when we went in and we encountered that, and through our user research, we presented it back to the stakeholders. It was, it is divided that way for a very good reason, because let's say you're in one department and you're in a different department and you're in a different department, each of you have your tabs, so you can post your information anytime you want, you can do the same, right? Whereas if I'm kind of mixing and matching the information from all of your 3 departments on the same page, because that is meaningful to the end user, then there's causing all kinds of interdependencies on the organizational level, right? So if he doesn't do his information is not up to date, then the overall page is not going to look okay. And there's all this tension and organizational friction that you have to work through when you're proposing a design. So just be aware of that when you're working on a large project. It's not just about the ultimate, the screen, but also working through the organizational things that happen behind the scenes. So ultimately, we were able to redesign the Department of Neighborhood Development, and that's what this project, this thing looks like right now. Another project that I wanted to talk about is in this field of sports. There is, the amount of data that's being collected is just pretty phenomenal. On the court, there are cameras. So there are cameras all over. So we're getting information from the cameras, we're getting information about from the umpires. And we, in this particular project, the WTA, the Women's Tennis Association, came to us and they wanted us to create an experience. And what, essentially, there's a 90-second time frame in a match where the coach gives feedback to the player. And how can you make that 90-second interaction really meaningful? So here, in this, we designed that application, it was rolled out, and as you can see, very minimal. We try to really focus in on the key information, and it was an iPad application, and you had to use your thumbs. Also making sure that it's high contrast so people can actually see it in broad daylight with their sunglasses on, and all that. Daria used it. She was number 41, and she actually won the game. So sometimes really focusing on the key information is so critical, rather than overwhelming people with too much information. And the final example that I'll give you is cars, like I mentioned earlier, are also generating a lot of data. So we worked with an automobile company, and the question was, how can we utilize this data to make how can we make it useful to the driver, to the dealer? So let's say you're a really fast driver and she's a very cautious driver, and you both currently have the same maintenance schedules, right? It doesn't really make sense. Maybe, since due to your driving patterns, you need to go into the dealer at different times. So how can we get the information from the cars that we have available to us to make things much more customized and meaningful? So these are examples of how, when you're swimming in data, the best approach is to focus on the human being who can utilize the data, and that'll help you make proper choices. So I invite you to go and look at this website. Not all customers give us permission to post the work, so whatever we can, we do that. It's typical. And so I want to leave you with 3 topics. One is big data is big and it's getting bigger, so it's really important for all of us as designers and information architects to get our, start thinking and structuring our ideas of how to deal with it. And then, turning the data to insights. And right now, when I talk to customers, they feel that, their job is done when they've collected a lot of data. Yeah, trillions, a lot of data, but then what does that mean? How is that turning into insights? That's the key question. And to do that, I think focusing on a human-centered approach, who is the person going to use the data, can always help you find the right answers. We find that design thinking is a way for us to work through very ambiguous problems, deal with different stakeholders. When you're working with a complex problem set, this process really helps us out. So that's all I have. Any questions?
What state is the data in when it gets to your team? I mean, if we think about data as a material, are there people on your team who are data scientists themselves with mathematical backgrounds, or?
So because my team is purely designers, interaction designers, visual designers, design thinkers, I don't have data scientists. But in each of these projects, we bring this virtual team together. So there would definitely be a data scientist in there. There will be different stakeholders in there. So I don't have data scientists because it's a different profession altogether. So we just get the right people at the right time each project. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. When you were designing for City of Boston, you mentioned there was internal tension. You encountered resistance from the organization. So how did you overcome it, and how did you manage push through your vision?
Yeah, I think again our technique was focusing on the citizen. So when we went to Boston and my team, we went to these evening classes for homeowners. So there were a lot of citizens open education that people can just come in for free and learn about how to get a home. And we started asking them, what kind of questions do you have? And then we took that information back to the stakeholders. So during the design thinking session, we have the opportunity to present 360 research. So we kind of curated 360 research and said, this is what we heard, and then we kind of leave it up to them and pause for them to understand and let it sink in a little bit. That's better. Ultimately, so we've kind of started to expect that it's a new way, I encourage my team to practice empathy for the end users as well as the stakeholders, because they need to get their job done, and ultimately you present the information in an objective way, in the most honest and integral way that you can, and if they really strongly feel that it has to be that way, you kind of have to let them do it, but in this case, credit to the City of Boston, they came together and they had a very tough discussion amongst the different stakeholders, and they did decide to change their website. So that was our approach. Just deep empathy, deep empathy. Yeah.
my question is, so I have personal data and I have worked on visualizations and creating dashboards and that kind of stuff. And the usual process that we follow to design any new product is, we sit down, brainstorm ideas, and we come up with a hypothesis. And then we build a prototype, we experiment with it, we take it to the users, see if it's working, if it's not working, using some metrics or actual user feedback. But with big data, especially when we're working with visualizations, we try to create a story instead of just putting up some graphs and dashboards and things like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what are the challenges that you have seen, in creating that story and actually, taking it all the way to the users and validating your story, whatever you have created with the users, and getting a confirmation that you got it right. So, like for example, in the case of that Super Bowl project that you did, like how did you validate that what you are going to present during that 1 week is the right data for the audience that is going to be there? How did you validate that?
Yeah.
And if you can also talk about the steps you took to come to the conclusions and decide what you are going to present that day.
Yeah. Okay. It's an art and a science.
Yes.
So, so first of all, to set the context, we started working with them in November. The Super Bowl city was January end, right? My God, it's a very tight time frame for that project. So November we started working, and we have the host committee who have their set of requirements. We have the league, they own the data, so anything we need we have to get from them. And then we have, there's a game developer, we did the games themselves are designed by another company called Brightlight. So they're getting the data, and so how do you mix and match all of this information together? We got lucky. We lined up, through friends and family. We started getting people to get, to interview, and we started asking them what kind of information would be. There were some users in our user research. There are some user interviews that change, that make you pivot your thinking around the project. Initially, it was all about leaderboards and competition and this and that, right? And there was one user I remember who we spoke to, and his point was, ultimately, as a fan, and he had been to multiple Super Bowls, and he had gone to all these different Super Bowl cities as well. So he said, ultimately, it's all about me saying I was there. It's not so much about me getting the highest score. It's not about me, any of that. It's about me saying I was there and just feeling great about it. So then we started switching, and that map we showed, where are you from? I'm from, so we thought people from the South Bay or people from the North Pole have some feelings of pride around that. So it changed our thinking. But that's a long answer to your question. The idea, you have to do friends and family research. I think in some of these short time frame projects, we don't have months to do in-depth user research. You just have to gather up, get these people, validate quickly, and move forward. Yeah, so it's no easy answer. But the storyboarding that you mentioned, that's a big part of what we do. In these cases, you're layering so much information, and it's definitely a fundamental shift in things, how people are doing it before. Conditional maintenance, for example, the fact that you need to do maintenance in different stages for different customers. I mean, my God, in the automobile industry, it's a big thing, right? You can't really think that way. So storyboarding is the best way to bring that empathy to your stakeholders. Yeah.
Hi, so I have a question about the cancer research that you did working with the doctors.
Yeah.
How did you bridge the gap between going from just providing information to also providing those recommendations?
Right.
And how did the doctors perceive that as far as their own capabilities, their own training and knowledge, and now having sort of a machine come in and say, oh, you can also do this. How did you like build that trust so that the doctors actually felt confident in taking that recommendation and not feeling threatened by it?
Yeah, I don't think we did the recommendation. It was more a pattern matching. So what they came to us for was just getting all the fragmented information together into one system. That's basically their expectation. But this pattern matching and in any case, this is similar to the marketing example that I mentioned. Users don't have still trust to say if the system just recommends this is what you need to do. I don't think we are there yet as a society to trust the machine so much that people will accept it. Especially in the case of cancer research, the doctors really have to feel comfortable. So the best we can do is to pattern match and present your findings and let the doctors and the researchers make that final call. But that in itself is a big leap forward. I took out a video in the cancer research. I have a video where a patient talks about it from her perspective. How she is able to take advantage of this thing, and it adds like years to her life. I just took it out. There's a lot of different languages in there, but if you guys are interested, I can play that for you. Yeah, but so we don't at this point in time just make one recommendation, but rather present our findings to the expert.
We can take one more question.
Hi.
Yeah.
So I think there's a path where there's a lot of data and you're trying to make sense of how to visualize it in a way that's meaningful. And I think there's also a path where you don't know what to collect, what kind of data to collect. And we need to come up with recommendations of where should we look, what kind of data should you be collecting so that we can then start making sense of visualizations. Do you have any examples of that second path where you guys have gone that path recently, just recommended where to look?
Yeah, we worked on a project for eBay, and they have these category managers who, so if you're in apparel or apparel, fashion, high tech, you're trying to. So today it's a manual process. They get the information. They're supposed to predict the demand going forward. But what we observed is they also check Twitter or news, right? So let's say there's a sporting event and the athlete is wearing a specific kind of shoe. They automatically know that there'll be a spike in the demand for those shoes. So again, I think the answer lies in getting an empathy for the human being and how they do their work. So as we saw that they are collecting information from all these unstructured sources in addition to the structured information, we were able to suggest, then why don't you bring all that unstructured information as well, and then you're layering on information, but in a way that people can find deep insights. Yeah? All right, thank you so much for your attention.